Next up, we have our dear friend Peter McGrath of Boeing here to tell us what exciting things are coming up for you. Now, you are a sponsor, so of course you feel invested not only in this mission, but the larger one. Tell us why this summit is something of importance to you.
Well, as we get all excited about this new decision, we're going to go back to the moon here in 24. Part of the conversation we've had over the last couple of years at this conference is how do we keep Mars in the context of that conversation? And when we look at designs that we're going to put place to accelerate getting to the moon, we need to think about, are we doing it in a way that it's just to get to the moon or put footprints back on the moon? We need to look at it more in a sustainable way, in a way where the technology feeds forward to what we really want to do, which is move on to Mars. So that drives some of the architecture decisions about what you're going to do with habitats and how you're going to do landers, what propulsion systems you might want to use. And so that kind of keeps the conversation alive. And that's kind of what the focus, I think, of the Human to Mars is really about, keeping a light on that part of the decision process as we go back to the moon.
And that's what you're going to be talking about in your panel that's going to be happening during one of the breakout sessions. With the group that you're meeting with, you all have to work together to get us all to Mars. What are you looking to gain from the conversations that you're having? Because I think that's what's great about these panels is that you're actually learning from each other and working together. So what are you looking to gain?
Well, our panel, we're going to talk a little bit more about Gateway, which the administrator said is the key piece in the sustainable architecture going back to the moon in more of a reusable way. And we'll talk more about that. But when you look at it, going to the moon and going back to Mars is going to be a global endeavor. It's going to take a lot of international partners. It's also going to take all of industry, not just one individual part. It's going to take new space, and I hate the word new space and old space, but it's going to take all of industry because we're coming with different approaches and different thoughts on how we can get there. And that's where we learn from each other. And actually, if you listen to most people, we're not that far apart. Most everybody's pretty well coalescing around what the right way is to get there. We just might have slightly different approaches.
Okay, I'm going to call you on that new space, old space thing. Why do you hate it? What do you think's what's a better term? Coin a better term for us.
I would say there's experience space and there's probably the new entrants. And as part of that, being in the industry as Boeing has for over 100 years now, we just draw on a lot of history and legacy of things we've already done, whereas new entrants tend to have to relearn that process again. But they may be more nimble up front, right? And that's part of the benefit of how we work together.
Okay, so 2024. We're going to have to kind of amp this up. When you hear something like that, do you all on your side say, yes, we're up for the challenge, or do you take a moment to really take it all in and then move forward? What's really happening behind the scenes?
I'll tell you what, probably a little bit of both. I'll tell you, as an engineer, the first thing I try to do is try to figure out how we're going to do it, right? But as a person in this space, it's exciting, because the best thing that can happen to our industry is have a level of excitement that then drives the funding and the decisions that make things happen. Part of the problem we run into is we get into lulls every now and then where we pull back or start over. The conversation I always say is stay the course. If we stay the course with where we're going, with all this excitement, I think we can get there in 24, or pretty close to that. If we try to reset and start something new, that's why we're always 10 to 15 years away from getting there.
That's great. I have a 6-year-old who's really into space, like most 6-year-olds are, right? He just recently asked, why do you call it the space race? Do you feel like we're in a new space race, or is this maybe a different Olympic game that we should be playing? What would you call what we're in right now?
That's a good question. I think if, based on the conversation you probably had earlier on the government side, there is a little bit of a space race happening. There's a new renewed interest in being in and around the moon for other purposes. But in terms of us from an exploration point of view, it's more of an exploration race. It's really about what we've learned is as we push ourselves further in the solar system, we actually drive technology that we don't expect that really sets us up as a technology leader. And so that part of it's important too.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you to Boeing for helping bring this conversation to the forefront, for being part of this conversation on the live stream. Matt is going to come back. He's brought some friends, specifically Scott, I believe, off of the stage to tell us what the aftermath of those conversations are. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. You have our next guest.